Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Now, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again, whether you're tuning in on the radio dial in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM. We welcome you all to our program today, as well as tuning in through our various affiliates around the world. We're glad that you all could join us as well. I think one of the topics that we have talked about the most on this program for the past 14 years has been, of course, relationships. And I think we all are in some type of relationship, whether it's dealing with our family, with a spouse, or even with those that we're working with. Well, of course, when it comes to marriage, that is one of the most challenging relationships sometimes that we definitely have to be able to work with. Of course, not all marriages do work out. There are individuals that end up having to feel the effects of divorce and everything that goes along with that. I'm really excited to welcome to our program today Jayson Cole. He's one of the co-authors of a new book called The CASUALTIES of Divorce. And I think when we think about divorce, a lot of times we think about, what happens to the individuals. We're going to talk to Jayson what it was like for him to work with his co-authors and not only being able to share their own personal stories, but also to be able to share that these are things that we can all be able to work with together. We can be able to help individuals as they're going through these difficulties, as well as, of course, how we can encourage others as well. If you're just not hearing about the book, we'll tell you at the end of our segment how you can get your own copy of it. But, Jayson, hello to you and welcome to the program.
Hello, Cyrus. It's an honor to be on the show. Congratulations on your upcoming 11th anniversary of Conversations Book Club coming up next Saturday from now. Congratulations on that great achievement, and an honor to be on the show.
Thank you. Well, look, man, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for being a part of our show. And as I said, Jayson, we talk a lot. I'm a single guy myself, but marriage is one of those topics I think that come up quite a bit on this program, whether I'm talking with authors of nonfiction like yourself or even through fiction. And, of course, there are going to be issues that come up, including, of course, divorce. What has it been like for you to be a part of this conversation? Because I thought what was so great about this book when I first heard about it, we hear a lot from the female perspective when it comes to divorce and relationships. We don't always get to hear from us guys. What has it been like for you to be a part of that part of the conversation?
It's actually been very therapeutic. Unfortunately, divorce does happen. I find, unfortunately, divorce is a majority of marriages these days. Marriage is very difficult. There's a lot of stresses out and everything else. And unfortunately, when people get divorced, unfortunately, and not to segregate the demographic, but the males usually take the biggest hit. It impacts. It's almost like an emotional traumatic experience. They take the biggest hit financially. They take the biggest hit sociologically, like where they have to live. Everything that we used to have paper in your wallet now becomes plastic. You increase debt. Depending on your age, and your condition to begin with, it's a tremendous hit to you on many, many different levels.
Right.
So to be part of it, and be able to share it and bring it out to people, you don't realize it. People don't realize that people are going through what people are going through until you actually know someone who's experienced it.
Right. And to that end, Jayson, talk to us about the writing of this book, because it's you and two other co-authors. How did you all come together to be able to say this is something you all wanted to work on and a topic you all wanted to be able to discuss?
Well, interestingly enough, I was going through some marital problems and going through a divorce, and I would share with my co-author, Vincent Cole, just the many negative aspects of it, the parental alienation that you go through with children, either taking sides, the loss of friends. Not that you lose the friends, but you just don't socialize with them anymore. Going into a different neighborhood, the financial hardships that you experience. And Vincent, as you know, was an author of another book. He wrote a few books called the Paparazzi a few years ago, and he then a few months after that he told me too, my God, I'm going through the same thing and everything else. And then we said, you know what, we should write about this. Why should we commiserate amongst each other? We can't be the only people going through this, And when we ended up figuring out that let's talk to people, let's interview people who are going through the same thing. So we embarked on pretty much a mission to, when we were at communions or baseball games or soccer games, and we knew of people who were going through divorces, we would very, very nonchalantly talk to them about it. And we found a lot of common denominators in almost every divorce. almost every divorce. The financial aspect of it, the loneliness of it. There's just a lot of different things that people that people went through, and we started to conduct these interviews, and we noticed, you know what, there's a lot of people hurting out there. And then once we got all this material together, we put it into a couple of composite people, some make-believe people, and we incorporated all the aspects that we found that that became apparent in these interviews, and we put it on paper. Luckily, a good friend of mine, Thomas Bellotti, my other co-author, he's been a psychologist for years, and we had him read the book, and he says, you're segregating a demographic, you're segregating women. And first we were like, well, the hell with women. He says, no, you can't do that, because they go through they go through a lot of changes too. They go through a lot of things also. But sometimes it's so much opposite, but still as devastating emotionally, financially, and likewise that males go through. So, we encompass his experience, his clinical experience after I think over 32 years of being a psychologist, a family psychologist who dealt with marriage, family, children, and we brought his knowledge into the book. And I just thought it was such a credit, and it was such an addition that a lot of people wouldn't realize, when you bring the female perspective into it. Yeah.
Well, one thing that you say early on in the book, The Casualties of Divorce, Jayson, is that this book was not going to be a disparagement of the other spouse. That was important for you. You mentioned, of course, being therapeutic. I can imagine as you are dealing with your own, your own situation, your own personal situation, that in itself is difficult. Was part of the therapeutic aspect of it for you that being able to hear from other people and knowing that you weren't alone in what you were feeling?
It was. I guess the proper word for it was enlightening. It was enlightening because, when someone goes through this stuff, your life changes dramatically. Like I said, you're still single. Good for you. No, I'm not kidding. But, your life does change dramatically. Like I said, a lot of the different things. You lose your social circles. Your mind is always racing about something. How are you going to pay this month's rent, to pay someone else's mortgage, obviously, So your mind's always racing. There's a lot of different things where you become off your game. So when you deal with people who are in like circumstances, I guess like any post-traumatic stress incident, you find comfort in that. And what we did was when we were conducting these interviews, people were very, very eager to tell their story. And it's not even the matter that their story was very similar to the person we spoke to a few days ago. It's just that they're feeling a lot of pain, and that pain a lot of the times they suffer in silence. And when you have an outlet where you're talking with someone who's experiencing like negative experiences, it's comforting. It's comforting, and a lot of time it can be empowering just to know that you're not the only person going through this. So with that respect, I found it personally empowering, as well as the people who were sharing their stories with us. Because at some point, when people get on a roll with their stories, it's very emotional. We've had many people, male and female, cry. They start to cry. And take a break. No, it's okay. We'll stop. No. I really, it's okay. I need to purge this. I need to do this. Thank you for listening. So we found it to be a positive experience. Although the situation is still there, but we found it very positive and empowering and enlightening to kind of get it off your chest.
Right. Wow, what a great thing. We're going to talk more about that. I want to say, for those who are just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. We're excited to welcome Jayson Cole to our program today. Jayson is one of the co-authors of a new book called The Casualties of Divorce. We'll remind you at the end of our segment how you can get the book for yourself. And, Jayson, I want to talk about, the stories, because as you mentioned, that Dr. Bellotti was very helpful in being able to kind of not only kind of look at these different situations that you all were able to cover in the book, but also to give some type of view, I think, that will help us all to kind of see what we can learn from each one. What was one of the big lessons that you took away from those that you were able to interview?
One of the main lessons a lot of people dealt with their children. We had one child or 3 children or 4 children. When they were coping with the negative aspects of divorce and how their relationship and the marriage is going, each child had to be, you can't just paint all your children with one brush, whether you have different sexes in children, different ages in children. Each child is a blank canvas, and you can't sit all 3 of them down at once and say, listen, Mom, me and your mom are separating, and things are going to be a little different. That's not fair to them. yes, they are our children, but what we do forget is that they're each human beings in their own right. And you can't tell a 13-year-old what's going on and what's going to happen to his life the same way you're going to tell a 6-year-old or a 17-year-old what's going to happen in his life. And one of the main lessons that I learned, and even sharing that with other people and getting that information from one gentleman and from one woman, was that your children are each a blank canvas. And if you're going to have these heart-to-heart conversations with them, you need to speak to them on their level. You can't take all the children in the room and say, okay, me and your mom are no longer going to be living together, and I'm going to see you on weekends and split holidays. It's not processed properly. And by right, they are each individuals in their own right, and they're different mindsets, they're different skill sets, and they're at different emotional levels in their little lives. So you have to. My experience was, and from other people who share this with me, is that one of the best ways to help children cope is to treat each one of them as if they're a separate canvas, and be specific to their age group, be specific to their mental status, be specific to their gender. And a lot of people have had success with that type of advice, as opposed to just boom, here's what's going on, and I'll see you next Saturday, and then the Saturday after that, and here's how we're going to do it. Some children can't quantify it, they can't imagine it, and they can't process it. So to make that transition easier, you try to treat them as individual on every level.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Do you think sometimes we forget? And again, not only am I a single guy, I don't have any kids either, Jayson. So I'm always very careful when I'm addressing things like this, because I cannot say, as I think some people mistakenly say, I know exactly what you're talking about, or I know exactly what you feel. Because I think even though you've gone through a similar situation, everyone feels differently about that situation. So it's hard to kind of paint men or women with a broad brush when it comes to that. But do you think sometimes we, and I say we collectively as the adult, that we sometimes don't think about the impact that this has on the children as well as on our family and friends? Absolutely,
because like on the opening lines, as I said, the divorce it's a war. It's a war. And, when at the end of the day, no one actually wins. And when you have two adults who have agreed or not agreed to end their marriage, you have casualties. The males have suffered the casualty because of financial and other aspects, or emotional aspects. The females do too. Where maybe the male had a phenomenal job and the wife never worked. Now the wife will be going to work, and her caretaking responsibilities are just doubled because now she's working full time and taking care of children. But what I found that men and women, they're either when they go, especially when they get attached to lawyers and bring it into that realm, they're fighting for either what they can get or what they can keep. And that battle becomes extremely, extremely vicious. And when it's two people, the parties in the divorce and their attorneys, and for some reason they're so close to each other's noses, yelling at each other, fighting each other, they forget to look behind them and see the children. And that's the sad part about it. Like I said, if you look at the cover of the book, I'm sure eventually it'll be up there. We have a picture of a beautiful Norman Rockwell home. Nicely lit, beautiful house, and it's split down the middle like a lightning bolt, and then you see silhouettes of a man and a woman with their backs towards each other, and that's basically what it is. You have a beautiful home, and the two parties agree, and this isn't going to work for whatever the reason, right, wrong, or indifferent. But people get so wrapped up in what they can keep and what they can get that they forget the children. And at times it's sad.
Yeah. So as you've been already having conversations like this, the book came out earlier this year, Jayson, what has it been like for you now to see the way that people have been responding not only to the topic, but the way that the three of you have been able to cover it?
It's been interesting. One of the most interesting reactions from one of the books was a friend of my mom's who is in her 70s. Both of her children, male children, both of her sons are going through different stages of divorce. And when the book had come out, my mom had given her a copy, and she read it, and she called me up within a few days after she got it, and she was in tears. And I said, "What's the matter? What's going on? Are you okay?" She goes, "I just read the book, and thank you. I want to thank you." And I said, "Why? I don't understand." She says, "I never realized what my children are experiencing on a daily basis with their children and their battles and their struggles during this, the breakup of their marriage, until I read your book." And that's so true, because a lot of times, we always have everybody in your corner. Your brother's in your corner, your sister's in your corner, your mother's in your corner, and every one of if you have 15 people in your corner, you have 15 different opinions on how to handle this. You know what I mean?
Right.
But on the other side of the ring, your spouse has her corner men too. You know what I mean? And they're giving her advice too. But you don't realize that at some point, many people who are going through this, they introvert their feelings. There's one part in the book where we describe, children. One kid woke up late at night and he heard his mom crying, through the closed bedroom door when she thought they were sleeping. And this was her time when her day was done, when work was done and the kids were done and the showers were done and the homework was done and the dishes were done, and the kids would go to bed. And when she would go to bed at night, she would just take her time and she would just cry. She would just cry because of the destruction of her marriage and the destruction of her life. So you don't realize that children hear this. Children hear this stuff, and everyone needs some type of outlet. And like I said, there's no winners. There's no winners in divorce. I know sometimes it's inevitable, and unfortunately it's the majority of how marriages end in our society. But the casualties of divorce are everywhere. They're everywhere. Not only the husband or wife, but the children and the extended families as well. For months and years, you've had your brother-in-laws, you've shared beers with them, you've gone to football games, you've had barbecues. These are your closest people. They're your family, and now you don't even talk to them anymore. If you see them at a sporting event, you don't even talk to them, and it's sad. And what'd you talk to him for? Why'd you go over and shake his hand? And it's another casualty about it. But at the end of the day, it takes its toll, and it takes its toll emotionally, and that's the worst part about it. The emotional toll it takes.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask you about one of the things we've been talking about a lot this year, Jayson, on the radio show, have been faith over fear. I mean, I know that for so many people, there are challenges that they face, there are difficulties that we all kind of go through. But a lot of times, because we're afraid of not only what the outcome might be, or even how people might perceive it, we just kind of stay stuck. Did you have any hesitation about not only sharing your story, but being a project of this? I mean, for a lot of people, wounds are hard enough, whether they're dealing with them by themselves or talking about it with those that they know. But I mean, what was it like for you to know that your story would be shared with the world?
It was actually. We were encouraged to do it, without a doubt. We were very, very encouraged to do it. But at the same time, you want to protect yourself, your privacy, your spouse's privacy, your ex-spouse's family, and you want to protect your children. So the book, like I said, how are we going to do this? How are we going to say, this is our story, please read it, please share it, and I hope it helps somebody, without offending everyone involved. So when we came up with these, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because everyone has a story, and look, you have friends who are married, you have friends who are divorced, and when you hear a story, you're like, wow, I know that happened to a friend of mine, something similar to that. So that's where we came up with the idea of composite characters. We were very, very specific in the introduction that the stories of you read of the three or four people, men and women, in the book about their story. It's not a specific story. It's not one person's specific story. We make it a point, and I think we use it in bold letters, that these are make-believe people. We just took the aspects or the negative aspects of 30 to 40 interviews, and we put them into these composite characters as an overall example of what people have experienced through the process of divorce. And I think by doing that, we were able to tell our story dignified and without hurting anyone. Which there's enough hurt to begin with, and eventually the books are written after a lot of the most damaging part is done. So we didn't want to rehash. We didn't want to reopen wounds. We didn't want to isolate people. We didn't want to segregate people. So we made it. We were very, very specific in explaining to the reader that these are composite characters, but they are composite characters based on numerous interviews of people in similar situations, and that's how we got around that point. But for a while, it was a challenge. It was a challenge on how to do it without being offensive, without opening up all wounds, and hurting people. And we made it a point too. We made it. Some people listen. You got to tell it the way it is. You know what? I said we will. I promise you we will. But we don't want to hurt people. That's the last thing we want to do here, because this book is about hurt to begin with. It's about loss. It's about separation. It's about a change of life, and any type of change. It involves management. It involves new perspectives. So we didn't want to scrape off open up old wounds and cause more bleeding. And we wanted people to heal from this book, and that was our objective.
Right. Well, you dedicate the book to the casualties, and I think one thing that I think comes across in this conversation, Jayson, is that that's all of us. I mean, whether you are in the relationship or friends of someone in the relationship, you all are kind of in this together. Is that one of the things you want people to know? Is that regardless of what aspect it is or whose quote unquote fault it is, that when it comes to the healing, we all have to be on this thing together?
You couldn't have said it better. A lot of people go through a lot, and divorce is traumatic. It's definitely a traumatic experience. And like I said, you're on the outside of someone else's divorce, be either a friend or be I'm sure a few weeks earlier you were friends with both of them. They were over your house. You were
right.
together at an event, and all of a sudden, we're getting a divorce. And listen, I understand people take sides. I understand that, and you have to respect someone for taking sides, and not even just a matter of why the divorce happened. Sometimes that just separates the sides very easily for everyone. But when people just when two adults have to end their marriage, it's almost like dissolving a business partnership. If there's no infidelity or anything else, it's like, wow, what happened? You know what? We just can't get along anymore. We just can't do this anymore. So people will take sides, but it's important for other people to realize, who are not married, who are outside of the family unit or something, that everyone is hurting a little here. There's no one's walking away from this like a victor, like the old picture of Saint Michael, putting the sword into the devil on all the Saint Michael pictures and coins. There is none of that in divorce. Yeah. There is none of that. It's a difficult slog, and all that go through it, they scar from it. They really scar from it. And we wouldn't wish it on anybody. Unfortunately, it's an inevitable part of our society. These are tough times. These are difficult times. Money is tight. Right. You have 3 kids. That 3 kids you have to save for college. You never save enough for college. But there's also other things too. There's breakdowns of communication. There's a lot of things that can lead to the end of a marriage. And you try to look at it as ending a business relationship. But you know what? There's a lot involved here. I remember one of the interviews I had where he had a teenage son, and he was talking with his teenage son about his teenage son came to him one day. He was going through the process and everything else, and he said, "Dad, me and my girlfriend, we're not seeing each other anymore." He's like, "Oh wow, we just couldn't get along, and we were arguing over little things, and it was one thing after another and everything else." He says, "So you breaking up?" He says, Yeah, we're just going to break up." He says, "Okay." He says, "Well, you don't have any houses, any bank accounts, any cars, and so you see how simple that is?" He says, "Now you understand what your mom and dad are going through, because you guys just say, okay, we're not going to text each other anymore. We're not going to, be friends with each other on social media anymore," and that technically is breaking up. But when you have, lives that you've built together, and you're putting a wedge to the two of them, it becomes much more complicated, and it leaves casualties in its wake, unfortunately.
Yeah. What a powerful thing, and what a great conversation, Jayson, for us to have and to show, again, that it's something that all of us, men and women, I think no matter where we might live, can appreciate, because it is something that whether we've gone through it ourselves, we definitely know someone who has dealt with it, and how we can best be able to be there to help them as they are trying to pick up the pieces. This conversation, even the title of the book alludes to, it does become, unfortunately, like a battlefield. And so to be able to help those, that are hurting is definitely something all of us can do. Again, Jayson Cole has been our guest. Great conversation with you, Jayson. The book is called The Casualties of Divorce. It's co-written by Jayson and 2 other great authors. Vincent Cassell, who you guys will be hearing on our program soon, has also joined in this conversation. So definitely want to invite you all to be able to get it. Dr. Thomas Bellotti, as you heard Jayson mention, is also a part of this. The book is available right now. If you can get it for less than $12 through our friends at Amazon.com, definitely take advantage of that. And then be a part of the conversation. The reviews are already coming in for the book. Make sure you all are adding your thoughts to it after you've read the book, because that's really what it's about, being able to keep the conversation going and to be able to let people know that, again, as we said here, that you're not by yourself in what you're dealing with. Jayson, thank you so much again for the time, and looking forward to staying connected with you.
Cyrus, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, and thank you for getting the message of the book out. Sincerely, we thank you.
Well, the pleasure is definitely all mine, Jayson, and we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. If you all came in late, you missed part of the conversation with Jayson, don't worry. Thanks to our online friends, you all can catch the replay right after we go off the air. The link is already available through our social media site, so head over to Facebook.com/CyrusWebb or go over to Twitter.com/CyrusWebb. If you click on the link there, you can listen to the show completely for free and share it with your friends from there, too. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying, as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Make sure you take out time to enjoy some good music as well as a great book. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live today. You all make it a great one.